Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's good to see everybody another Sunday morning. We're glad that we had a good week, hopefully, and we're glad to be here. We are going to start our adult Bible study for this morning. Before we do so, we always want to start with a word of prayer. So at this time, let's go to our Father in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us this morning once again. We're grateful for the sun, and we're grateful that you've given us light so that we may be able to see the world. And we're grateful that you've given us life, and that we're able to be woken up in our eyes and be able to be here, Father, in this opportunity to come to your house once again, and an opportunity to open up the scripture this morning. We're grateful for those that are here. We're praying for those that are on the way. We're praying for those that are not here physically, but are here virtually. We pray that all of us will be able to focus our hearts and minds into understanding you and be able to glean more to our lives from the lessons that you've given us through your word. We're grateful for it, Father. And we pray to be able to apply it to our lives, Father. Please be those that are traveling, and we pray that you be with us throughout the rest of the service and the remainder of our lives. We thank you. And all these words we pray unto you and your Son, and Jesus Christ, in the time we should say, Amen. 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 All right, so we are continuing on our story of going over the kings of Judah. Last week we've been going over the king Amaziah. As we know that we have been following the genealogy literally all the way from the beginning of King David, following on the lineage of all the kings on the two tribes that have separated between Israel and Judah, and we have been focusing on the tribe of Judah, looking at the lineage, really that goes down all the way to Jesus Christ. We have been looking at a whole bunch of kings that have been a roller coaster of ups and downs, starting all the way back. If you recall, it's always good to keep things in perspective when it comes to where everything came from. So during this moment when I have the opportunity to speak, I always want to recap the whole lineage so we can get a grasp of where everything is coming from. We know from King David came King Solomon, from King Solomon came Rehoboam. That was a big separation because Rehoboam was the king in which the kingdom was divided into two, the northern tribe and the southern tribe. And the southern tribe is the thing that we're focusing on. That's the way the lineage carries over. And from Rehoboam, we had Abijah and Asa and Jehoshaphat. Jehoram was one we took some time in going over. And then came Ahaziah. That was the really the downward spiral, right? Jehoash was the return, and Amaziah was what we looked at last week. And Brother Ricardo did a good job in showing the complexity of these characters, and in Amaziah in particular, to see that the good that you do doesn't outweigh the bad that you do. And in this scenario, that was the sad part, because Amaziah died with his own people conspiring and assassinating him. So we are following on his son. The Bible does a little bit of a confusion with the names, because there's two names that is given. One is Uzziah, and the other is I think they say it. Let's see, Uzziah and Azariah. That's the confusing part, because the father has a very similar name to the son. That's why. So to remove the confusion, we're just going to say Uzziah for this chapter and for this morning. So the reading today will come from 2 Kings chapter 15 and 2 Chronicles chapter 26. And just like before, we want to do a reading of both the accounts, because as we saw that the king does a good job of putting down the general lineage of who came after what and what generally happened. But the 2 Chronicles dwells a little bit deeper and to look at the things like behind the scenes and giving more details. So that's why we want to look at both readings. If you don't have the Survey of the Old Testament book, which should be some in the back, we are going over the two questions. This one should be pretty simple compared to the other questionnaire. So So with that said, let's go and start our reading. The first reading will begin from 2 Kings chapter 15. So if you have your Bibles with you, that's where we're starting off. 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 1 to 7. Unless we had any volunteers that would like to read, I'll just for consistency, I'll just start reading it. 2 Kings chapter 15, starting in verse 1. It says, in the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, son of Amaziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother's name was Jehoiada, and she was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. The Lord afflicted the king with leprosy until the day he died, and he lived in a separate house. Jotham, the king's son, had charge of the palace and governed the people of the land. As for the other events of Azariah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Azariah rested with his ancestors and was buried near them in the city of David, and Jotham, his son, succeeded him as king. So this 7 verses kind of summarizes this lineage of this king Azariah, or I should just say Uzziah, just for consistency purposes. And it is kind of a little short as far as, for one of the longest reigning kings. And it says that 52 years, which is compared to all the other kings we'll be looking at, this is like amazing, because even the good kings, have not had that long of a reign. And with that said, it doesn't really dwell into a lot of the finer details. It just says that that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father had done, but he failed on the thing that has been obeying on the kings of Judah, which is the high places, and that, however, would not, and people continue to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. So there was good that was done, but literally looking at all the way back to King Jehoshaphat, the high places have been continuing, and that has not changed with this king either. And in a kind of like a last sentence kind of way, it says that this king was unique because he suffered one of the most grievous diseases, the disease of leprosy, which is a very personal disease that gets right to your daily being, right? So that is what this story is unique of this king who is suffering from leprosy and during the last of his age, right? And this is 52 years, like that's a long time that he has been separated. He lives in a separate house. Leprosy is something that is so contagious that even kings have no exceptions to interact with the normal everyday people. So he's living in a separate place till the end of his final days. And his son, Jotham, which we will go over in the coming weeks, will be the following king. And this is the long period, really the longest period that is recorded as far as kings rule. And we have seen a good pattern where kings that have done what is right in the sight of God have had longer reigns, and versus the kings that have not done right. Like we saw some kings that have literally like barely got a year, right? So in this regard, it is good that we see some positives, but it is not all positive. Like I said, it's all complicated. 7 verses is not enough to judge, 52 years reign. So that's why we're going to look at Chronicles. But but it does say that he's a very young king, where the father gets assassinated. So it is fallen upon the king's son to be the next in line. And that has always been a point of contention because the youngest people, when they're coming to power, have not been the best example because of the influence that they carry, whether it be from, people, people that they have around, or their mothers, or, family members that take their mind away from God and these things that have not been the best. But in Azariah's case, Uzziah, I should say, it has been for the better. So let's look at a little bit more detail when we read on the other account, second, instead of second, after second Kings 15, we're looking at Second Chronicles 26. There's a little bit longer reading. Second Chronicles 26. So we're gonna look at a little bit of the finer details of what how exactly King Uzziah is doing. All right, let's read. Second Chronicles 26, starting verse 1. So then all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in his place of his father Amaziah. He was the one who rebuilt Elath and restored to Judah after Amaziah rested with his ancestors. Uzziah was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother's name was Jehoiada, and she was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. He sought God during the days of Zechariah, who instructed him in the fear of God. And as long as he sought in the Lord, God gave him success. He went to war against the Philistines and broke down the walls of Gath, Jabneh, and Ashdod. He then rebuilt towns near Ashdod and elsewhere among the Philistines. God helped him against the Philistines, against the Arabs who lived in Gurbaal, and against the Midianites. The Ammonites brought tribute to Uzziah, and his fame spread as far as the borders of Egypt because he had become very powerful. Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate, at the valley gate, and at the angle of the wall, and he fortified them. He also built towers in the wilderness and dug many cisterns because he had much livestock in the foothills and in the plains. He had people working his fields and vineyards in the hills and in the fertile lands, for he loved the soil. Uzziah had a well-trained army ready to go out by divisions, according to the numbers as mustered by Giel, the secretary, and Messiah, the officer, under the direction of Hananiah, one of the royal officers. The total number of family leaders who were the fighting men was 2,600. Under the command was an army of 307,500 men trained for war, a powerful force to support the king against his enemies. Uzziah provided shields, spears, helmets, coats of armor, bows, and slingstones for the entire army. In Jerusalem, he made devices invented for use on the tower and on the corner defenses, so that the soldiers could shoot arrows and hurl large stones from the wall. His fame spread far and wide, but he was greatly helped until he became powerful. But after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall. He was unfaithful to the Lord his God and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. Azariah, the priest, with 80 other courageous priests of the Lord, followed him in. They confronted King Uzziah and said, "It is not right for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. This is for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Leave the sanctuary, for you have been unfaithful, and you will not be honored by Lord God." Uzziah, who had a censer in his hand ready to burn incense, became angry. When he was raging at the priest, while he was raging at the priest in their presence before the incense altar in the Lord's temple, leprosy broke out on his forehead. When Azariah, the chief priest, and all the other priests looked at him, they saw that he had leprosy on his forehead, so they hurried him out. Indeed, he himself was eager to leave because the Lord had afflicted him. King Uzziah had leprosy until the day he died. He lived in a separate house, leprous and banned from the temple of the Lord. Jotham, his son, had charge of the palace and governed the people of the land. The other events of Uzziah's reign from the beginning to end are recorded by the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos. Uzziah rested with his ancestors and was buried near them in a cemetery that belonged to the kings. For people said he had leprosy, and Jotham, his son, succeeded him as king. So like I said, the Second Chronicles does a much better job in looking at the finer details of this really long reign that this King Uzziah had. 16 years of age, he has one of the things that is focused that he has done is be able to build the army, be able to build the structures to guard the people of the kingdom of Judah. So in that regard, he has succeeded in doing a lot of good in terms of building the people and protecting the people. And one of the things that we see once again is that as long as he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, he has been blessed, right? And because it's a young king, we see a lot of instances where it says that he had gotten a lot of good help, in the sense that, guidance is so important in a growing individual, and having proper guidance leads to success. And in this regard, there is also the individual of Zechariah, right, that mentions instructing him during his times, through difficulties, and instructed him in fear of God. It says right on verse 4. So, and that's the pattern and the example that we see, is that having a fear of God, right, in your actions when you act, having the knowledge that the blessings that you have received is not of your own volition, but of God blessing you. And in every action that you take, having the God in your helm has been one of the things that has benefited Uzziah in his reign, right? And he said that he actively not just defended, but went to wars against the enemies, right? Not just broke down the enemies, but be able to establish areas within the borders of those other cities, right? To a point where it says that the Ammonites brought tribute to him, right? And it says his fear spread as far as the borders of Egypt because he had become very powerful. So it's literally, he's counteracting the thing that has been happening over and over, is that other tribes, other countries are influencing the kingdom of Judah. But now, finally, right, we have a king who is led so strongly that he's having influence on those outside, right? That the individuals that are outside of the kingdom are also able to hear of the works that's going on. So that's a big accomplishment, to say the least, as far as this king goes. So in that regard, the king has done, wonderful thing to be able to build up this army, and to be able to build up not just the army, but also influence to other states, all the way to Egypt, right? This is the original land that these people came from, right? So to see the story of them flourishing would be a good example to even lead other people into thinking about who their God is, thinking about, what is the reason that these people are able to do so good, right? And not just that these simple-minded people who were slaves are now a fortified army, right? It gives specific account to say how much the nation has grown, how much the military has grown. It goes to details looking at all the structures, all the weapons, and all the individuals that were involved in growing these armies, to show that in this regard, Uzziah did a lot of good things. But it does not fail to show the shortcoming as well, which is literally the ultimate downfall, right? Where it says right in verse 16, but after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall, right? He said that the act that was the triggering point to his arrogance, to his I guess his ego, is that he does things that is not for him to do, right? This is not a new phenomenon that is new to people today, right? When people are so high on their own mindset, right? They control everybody. They try to control everybody and to be able to think that they do everything, like they are the whole entity, right? This is important because these are people of God, like these are godly people, right? And this is a lesson for us because this is not any different today, where there is a danger of that within our own congregation, within our own families, within our own people, because this this ego is something that is like a bane of humankind altogether. That as well as you're doing, right, the more blessings you receive, easier it is for you to think that the blessings are for your own merit and not from God, right? To see that because I am in a place of power and authority, that this is all, because of who I am, and I don't have any shame in misusing it because I earned this. To say that, if I am in the pulpit, like this is a good example where I'm in a pulpit, if I have hardly my headset to think I earned this place and I start blaspheming the God, right? Then that's literally the same mentality, because you think that the things that you earned is because you did, and that will lead to your own downfall, right? That'll lead to you straying from the purpose. The king's purpose is to build and not to desecrate, right? So that has been his own downfall. That Uzziah, though he did good, and this is a long way, and this is hard to just narrow it in 27 verses or so, but to say that all the good that he did is not in vain, right? Because you see that the next generation is going to benefit from the growing army, from the influence that under Uzziah's king had. But at the same time, right, the other ember is going as well, where he himself, right, because of his ego and in hard-headedness, is acting against God's will. And this example of burning incense is something that is not new to these people, to say to say the least, right? That that really they look at the history all the way back to Abraham, they look back at the history of Moses and Aaron, to see that separation of act of those two brothers, to see what the rules are for each individual. And it's not unknown to them, but that level of hard-headedness kind of leads them to think that they can do whatever they want. Sister Nana?
Yeah, I think this is very interesting because I also, he may have thought, the king may have thought, because the Lord has blessed me so much. And I think this happens today also. We look at all of the blessings that the Lord has bestowed upon us. Then we start to think that we're righteous, right? And because we're so righteous, we found favor in the eyesight of God. And because we found favor in the eyesight of God, we can do no wrong in the eyesight of God. So we've got the ego, and then we have, the blessings that God has given us. And then we start to think, well, wait a minute, God is clearing roles, right? Very clearing roles. Certainly very clear roles here with the priest and lighting of the incense. But when we get to the point where we think we're so close to God that although he put roles in place, they no longer matter, which means we can go outside of that because we're close to God and he's blessed us. And so it's okay if my role is this, right? And I go outside of that role to do somebody else's role or another role that God has established. Then we start looking at ourselves as though we're untouchable, right? Not thinking that, listen, God's the same, right? His instructions for us are the same. If we do what he says, according to the way he wants us to do it, he's there and he blesses us. The minute we deviate from that, it's no longer us. Like we're thinking, oh, we're still okay. We're not okay, right? And the ego, the pride, right? We know Proverbs tell us about what happens. Pride comes before the fall. It's gonna happen. That destruction is going to be there. And I think that for Christians, when things are going well in our lives, right? We feel sometimes that, oh, I'm in good standing with the Lord. So if I go over to the left, I'm still okay because God is blessing me, not knowing. And it happens a lot of times in the church. It happens with, it's all about the roads, right? When God clearly says, this is what I want, that's what he wants. Don't ever think that we can get to a place where, yeah, he said it, but because he's blessed me, I know he's not going to hold it against me. What manner of man are we to even think that way, that we can do something to change the mind of God from what he said, right? When it didn't happen with his son on the cross. And I think we have to be very careful in that regard and not to go outside of what God has commanded us to do. And so the blessings will come as long as we are obedient to what God established. The minute we go outside of that, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought to, right? Because it puts you in a danger zone and you may not realize it. You may not realize it. Think about this. And is it too late? Can you get to an age where you say, I can't fall away? No, because you can start doing, how long you're reigning? Like 52 years. That's so long. Someone would say, you know what? He's never gonna fall. 52 years, he's good. But you haven't finished the race. And if you haven't finished the race, which is what we're talking about in the ladies' Bible class, you say, if you haven't finished, you're not gonna get there. You've got to finish. And you can't finish if you're not obedient.
There's a video of this cyclist who's in the Tour de France, and he's so close to the thing, and he just starts like going, just let's go to the bar. And then there's a guy like behind him, like really speeding up. And you overtakes them, right? Because you're overconfident, this idea of corruption. And this is a good place to think, as Sister Donna brought, because there are kings that do evil in the sight of God and are boastful about it. But this is boastfulness in the other end, where you think because you're doing things for God that you're untouchable, as Sister Donna mentioned, right? This is the flip side of it. And this is more personal side of it, because we are on this side, right? We think we are doing good, but is that letting us corrupt our judgment? That is a good thought to have. And this idea of corruption is so innate within people. Like you look at your own child, right? Where if you are growing them up with all the love and all the things, and letting I guess if the child is so comfortable, right, then they might think that they can get away with other things because they're so close to you that you will not do anything, right? This is a hard lesson for parents, because you love your kids so much, you don't do anything to harm them, right? And in this regard, if they are so close, they are treating you like friends, not knowing that there is a relationship, right? You're not friends, parents, right? There's a line where you're not, the love is not gonna overcome the right rules that have set forth, right? Like I think this is, I guess we in our own human mindset think that, of course it's gonna be okay, right? Like that's literally from the beginning of creation is, like the first act of defilement was an act of arrogance to say, well, I mean, it's only going to do good. Why would it do bad if I eat from this fruit, right? Like it's that idea that because you are in God's realm, that you are without any risk, without any there's no way that you can fail, I guess would be a way to say it. And in this regard, same with Uzziah, to say that I have built this kingdom so well, right? Why can't I burn that incense, right? Like incense is not a bad thing, right? It's a thing that you're doing to show favor, right? And, in your own logic, you might say, why can't I do this, right? And again, this is a tricky subject when it comes to things today, because, that's literally how denominations form, because of the same falling down on this path, because you think, I have been blessed with God, why can't we do it this way? It'll only make it a little easier. Why can't we do it this way? And once you start twisting, the word to your own benefit, you don't see, how far it's gotten. And it says here that the priests were scared, right? Like, it wasn't just the one priest, it was like the collection of priests, even with fear, had to go up to the king, as in that power had really gotten to his head, to a point where people are starting to be afraid. Like, hopefully, if you are in a place of authority, whether you're a parent, you're a supervisor, you're in, leadership in congregation, hopefully you're listening to, the people that are under you, because they will be able to get an idea of how you are as a leader, right? As if people are in fear of you, that's not a good sign to begin with. As a parent, like, if your kids are not respecting you and loving you, but are afraid of you, that's, not the best way either. Same with the, leadership position in the congregation, where if you are feared by the members of the congregation to even bring up the fact that you are doing, acts against God, right? That is, you have kind of fallen by the wayside with your, with your pride. So that is the danger that we have. Mrs. Don, do you have any comment before we go to the next one?
Yeah, I think our intentions, good intentions, do not outweigh God's instructions. I think that's it, right? Yeah. We have good intentions, many of us, a lot of times, but our good intentions just don't outweigh God's instructions, because if we're not obedient, then there's a wrath of God, right? Didn't one of the Aaron's sons die?
Yeah.
Because of the intentions were good, trying with the tabernacle, good, right? Trying to catch it, but it doesn't matter. And I think sometimes we have to take a step back and think, Lord, what is my role? What is it that you have me to do? I can't decide, you know what, I think I'll get up this morning. I got a word, right? And I want to deliver it. That's not my role, right? That's not my role. My intentions may be good. But you know what they say about the road and intentions, it doesn't matter. And I think for us as Christians, to stay humble is to always remember the role God has placed you in, what he wants from you, and to remember, even if you have something you think you want to do good, it doesn't outweigh God's instructions if it goes against what he's already established.
Exactly. And I think the example you gave of even the Son of God not having any leeway, right? Like, if that is the standard, right? Where your own son, is saying, let this pass from you, right? If that does not get an exception, why would you be any different, right? In the sense that if you think because, you are in a position of holy authority, that you can do acts against God, that you would not receive any repercussion, that is arrogance. Right? That is the folly of so many kings before, and it is the same folly that befalls this king also. That because you think that you know better, because you think that you are the one that is in control, right? And leadership is so fraught today with this, right? Like we, especially with when you have built a trust, right? You feel like it's so easy, to make leniency against them, right? I mean, like talking at really hard subjects when we look at, the topic of this, all these accusations against people of holy authority, right? And when we talk about Catholicism in terms of all the individuals that were abused under that, right? When you think about people that have done atrocities in the name of like greater good, right? That is that example of where you think your actions are unhindered because the overall goal has been good. See, God doesn't work that way, where you thinking that because it's for the greater good, that you can take the law into your own hands. The example of touching the tabernacle was a good one because it it seems like it's a good idea, right? But if we still take authority in our hands, that's, you'll see the repercussion, you're not omitted from the repercussion. And that is why this king is forever gonna be known as the king with leprosy. That's literally his final legacy, sadly. All the good things that he's done, right? And the thing about it is, this is one of those instances where the ramification was like so immediate. He says that he was so ready, right? He had censer in his hand, he says, and was ready to burn incense. And he started getting angry because they rebuked him, like the prophets that got the priest, Azariah, right? And 80 other courageous priests, he says. Finally, he stood up to him, and he was so angry that he said, while he was raging at the priests in their presence before the incense altars in the Lord's temple, leprosy broke out in his forehead immediately, right? Like that is a ramification that we sometimes think it's, and especially people that are so hard-headed on certain action, they think the ramifications are not coming. And the immediate is the thing that you need to feel, because this person is a king, right? He's not a common man that would have those ramifications. But king or no king, when the review comes, right, it doesn't matter, right? If you're a king or if you're a pauper, like it's gonna happen, and when it happens, you can't alter with the time frame. If it happens immediately, it happens immediately. And in this regard, it really happened immediately, where as soon as he started getting angry at the priest, leprosy fell on him. And literally, they moved him like immediately, he says, right? That hurried him out, right? And he himself was eager to leave, right? Because he realized what is happening now. And leprosy is one of those things that never kills you, right? If you survive it. Just so you know, the way leprosy as a disease works is if you get it, you either die or it just remains in you for the rest of your life. Like you're always carrying leprosy. That is a very harsh reminder that he will always remember for the final days, right? That God afflicted him for the remainder of his life for his actions, right? That is a very hard lesson because you can't die immediately. It's a disease that is filled with pain and suffering, but if you survive it, leprosy just lives with you, and that is an example of God's punishment, right? Where you get to see somebody else take the helm, right? All the things that you built, the next person is going to carry on. You get to see it, but you don't get to do anything because you are separated, right? He said that he rested separately, right, from the rest of not just from the temple, right? That's the place where he wanted to be, where he was defiling the temple with his actions, but even from the rest of the population, he was always separated for the rest of his life, right? And it said that in the final passage, right, when he was buried near them in the cemetery, for the people always said he had leprosy, right? Like that would be his final resting place and the legacy of this king. Even when you look at like the genealogy, I pulled up this chart from this book Dad had purchased, where it shows all the genealogy of the kings, and it highlights like bullet points about the things that these kings are known for. And on that regard, Uzziah sadly was known as the king who died of leprosy. I mean, he should have been known as the king who reigned the longest and the king who did so much good, but that is his lasting legacy. And that's, a very hard lesson to comprehend, right? Just like Sukadana mentioned, in the final bouts of your race, right? Because you think, I have done God's work till my 60s and 70s. Why can't this thing slide? Why can't this thing, I get a pass of this thing, right? That is a very sad reality, right? That you don't get a pass, even though you did so much good in your final years. This will be your final legacy. So, Brother Tony, you have a point?
Yeah, it's interesting. I like verse 23 where it says Uzziah arrested when he says that they were very near them. In a cemetery that would go to the kings. So it's correct. Even after he's dead, he's paying for his sins, like right. He was arrested near them. So he wasn't among them, he was near them. So even after he's dead, he was still isolated from the other kings. And like that just brings me back to the point that we've been making throughout these lessons, is that your sins not only affect you, but it affects other people around you as well, right? Yeah. So even if he's dead, they're like, let's not put him near the other kings, right? Let's put him a little farther away. That way he doesn't impact or affect the other kings. And it just speaks to us, like we see the decisions of these kings, whether good and bad, they impact themselves, obviously, and then it impacts other people, right? We see that over and over and over again. And then the second point I wanted to make in terms of pride kills. Like pride kills, and we could talk about this now for the people we see in power, or the people trying to gain power. That's why Jesus said in Matthew 19:24 that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for someone who is restored to the kingdom of God. That is so true, because as you gain power, as you have more money, and as you gain affluence in society, you start thinking that you're above them, right? You start thinking that you are bigger than the law, you are bigger than everyone else, and it's easier for you to look down on people. And so that's what he was doing, and that's what happened. He became powerful. His pride led to his downfall. He figured, this is just instant. What's the big deal here? Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and do it too, just like they did. And imagine if God didn't strike him down with leprosy. Imagine what he would have done with the priests, right? They said 80 other priests mustered courage to go and confront him. If he was not struck with leprosy, nothing had happened, because he was raging at this point. He was pissed, right? He probably would have put them all to death, like honestly, because that's what we've seen a lot of these things were cruel. So I'm not going to put it past him to say that he probably would have isolated them, put them all to death, or make them suffer some severe consequences. But again, like the things that God gives you, the things that you have, the money you have, the possessions you have, are you good stewards of those things? What are you doing with those things? Are you using them to further God's work and God's will and his kingdom? Or are you using them to look down on others and say, look at you, you don't have this, I don't have, but I have it all. Like, what are you doing? Are you good stewards of the things that God has provided to you?
Exactly. And we have seen this continually being a pattern where the lesson of pride, the lesson of entitlement has been a downfall to these things, right? These things are supposed to lead by example, but the biggest corruption has always been the power that comes with being the king, right? That is one of the greatest strengths that King David had, was even though he had so much authority, he never let that get to his head, in a sense that he always thanked God for the authority that is given to him, because he knows where he started from, right? From a common shepherd boy to being this king, to be able to have that realization of where God brought you from, where you are, right? Where God brought you now to where you came from, right? That was always in his head. And that's the folly of these kings, as the same pattern has repeated, right? But if you are not learning from the histories of your own ancestors, you are bound to repeat the same mistakes. And this lesson of pride is very, very apt, right? Because when you have too much pride, God is going to give you a humble image. And it's not going to be nice. It's going to be better because he lived on. He did not die immediately. He lived on to see all power stricken from him, right? All the power that he had, all authority that he's had is stricken, and he doesn't even come in contact with people anymore. Like, that is the level of humility that God put on this Uzziah's king, this King Uzziah. So for the lesson for us this week is to have a mindset of Christ, right? Where he, being the Son of God, showed humility in every step of the way till his final moments, till his death, right? That is the mindset that we need to have, and we need to overcome our own self our own self-ego, our own pride that is a danger of corrupting your faith, right? That is in danger of corrupting the word, because you yourself think you are better. And I mean, the two questions that we have are really touching on this exact point that we went through. Just for consistency purposes, I will read the questions and just go briefly over as we conclude. Question 23 says, describe the general character of Uzziah's reign from a spiritual standpoint. Like it says that he was good, as long as he was good, he did, what was good in the eyes of the Lord, as his father Amaziah had done. He did good, right? And it says that the conflict has still been the same, as the high places have not been removed, and the people continue to make sacrifices and burn incense, and the pride that has come has been his biggest fault. And the second question really adds exactly to that, because what affliction came upon him and what sin brought such a punishment was that sin of pride that came upon the king. His actions are desecrating God's instructions of how his temple is held, right? His temple is maintained, and the sin of leprosy came upon him, right? This is that example of why you do not mess with God's word, especially in a place of his worship, right? This is like a lesson to us worshiping, not the people that are already living in sin, the people that are already living in a life of pride, without a care, looking down on people with entitlement. That is always happening, right? But this is a lesson for us today, that we ourselves don't go too hard, too prideful in our ways, and be able to desecrate, especially at a time of worship, right? When after this we'll have our worship after, we want to be able to do it not out of our own will and desire, of our own volition, but according to God in spirit and in truth, right? That's important. So that is the lesson that we have for this moment. We're going to conclude with a word of prayer. All the men, if we can gather in room 4, so you can pray before worship service. Unless there's any thoughts and any comments, we will conclude with a word of prayer. This time, let's sort of Father in prayer. Dear most Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this opportunity once again, for this day that you've given us, and this opportunity to open up this scripture. We're grateful, Father, for the lessons that we see, and we're grateful for the message that we can learn from these kings who have done so much, but also fallen so far. And we pray that we'll be able to apply the good that they have done and stray from the bad that have corrupted them. Father, this lesson of pride, we pray that you always give us humility, that we always be able to see that you are the one that is in charge of our lives, and that is our guidance for our path, for our future. And we pray that we do not let ourselves get in our way, and be able to do what is your desire of us in our individual lives. We are praying that you be with those that are arriving here after on the roads and highways and byways. We will be having a worship service on you in spirit and truth. We pray you be with us throughout, and be with us for the remainder of our lives. All these words we pray unto you, in your Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, in the congregation say, Amen. Amen.